Welcome to And Gen X Ruled the Multiplex. I often describe this series as being about the films that shaped the MTV generation, and in today's case I'm looking at a film that seems absolutely tailor-made for viewers hooked on the sleek and stylish music videos that dominated the early days of MTV. 1983's The Hunger was the directorial debut of Ridley Scott's brother, Tony Scott, who directed 1986's Top Gun, which I've already looked at here. Based on Whitley Strieber's 1981 novel, the screenplay for The Hunger was written by television writer James Costigan, writing under the pen name Ivan Davis, and Michael Thomas, who co-wrote the screenplay for Ladyhawke, which I've also already looked at here. We open in a goth nightclub in New York. On stage, gothic rock legends Bauhaus, fronted by Peter Murphy, perform Bela Lugosi's Dead, while black-clad beautiful young things hang out on a smoky and low-lit dance floor. An impossibly elegant couple in sunglasses scope out another couple, and eventually both couples end up at someone's home. The elegant couple are John and Miriam, and they are played by the legendary David Bowie and by French film star Catherine Deneuve. We've already seen Bowie, of course, back when I looked at Jim Henson's Labyrinth. At the time of The Hunger, Catherine Deneuve had already been a screen star for over 20 years in films like Repulsion and Belle de Jour. The nameless young couple they bring home are played by playwright John Stephen Hill and by performance artist Anne Magnuson, whom we already saw in a brief appearance in Desperately Seeking Susan. The two couples smoke and drink and fool around. John and Miriam are both wearing ankh necklaces that double as sharp knives, and at a certain point in the proceedings, they slaughter the young couple. Later, we see John burning the plastic-wrapped corpses in a furnace. While lounging in bed in the tastefully appointed townhouse he shares with Miriam, John dreams of his past. He was a human in the 18th century when he met his immortal beloved Miriam, who turned him into a vampire and promised him they'd be together forever. As in Catherine Bigelow's Near Dark, which I looked at a while back, the word vampire is never used in the film, but John and Miriam are sexy immortals who drink human blood, so vampire seems to be the obvious conclusion. Meanwhile, a gerontologist named Dr. Sarah Roberts conducts experiments with accelerated aging in monkeys. Sarah hopes to find the key to reverse aging in human patients afflicted with a rapid aging disorder. Sarah is played by Susan Sarandon, star of the Rocky Horror Picture Show and Thelma and Louise, and Oscar winner for Dead Man Walking. Her co-worker boyfriend Tom is played by Cliff DeYoung. Vampires by night, John and Miriam are mild-mannered music teachers by day. They give violin lessons to a young student named Alice, played by soap opera star Beth Ehlers. While accompanying Alice on the cello, John suddenly grows weary and stops the lesson. Miriam, who seems to have a special interest in the field of accelerated aging, stops by a bookstore where Sarah is signing copies of her new book. Sarah is immediately fascinated by Miriam, who seems to have cast some kind of spell over her. Back at the townhouse, John is distraught to realize he's losing his hair, and he's starting to show signs of age. John and Miriam discuss Miriam's past lovers, all of whom, after an extended period of supernatural youth and beauty, rapidly aged into withered husks. John is beginning to undergo this process, and he suspects Miriam has already selected young Alice to replace him when he becomes too frail to support himself. John, looking increasingly haggard, visits Sarah at her clinic and demands that she treat him. Suspecting he's a crank, she brushes him off. While waiting in the lobby, John ages even further. By the end of the day, he has become a very old man. David Bowie's extensive and very effective old age makeup is the work of special effects makeup wizard Dick Smith, known as the Godfather of Makeup, who won an Oscar for F. Murray Abraham's old age makeup in Amadeus. John confronts Sarah as she's leaving the clinic. Astonished by how much he's aged in a very short time, she offers to treat him, but he storms off in anger. In Central Park's Bethesda Terrace, John comes across a skater roller skating to Iggy Pop's Fun Time. Desperately craving a rejuvenating hit of blood, John tries to slash the skater with his ankh, but finds he now lacks the strength to overpower him. Alice drops by the townhouse unexpectedly. She fails to recognize John, now very old and withered, and he stabs her to death with the ankh and feeds on her. When Miriam arrives home, a decrepit John begs her to kill him. She carries him up to the attic and puts his still-living body in a coffin next to the coffins of all her other still-living former lovers. A police detective named Lieutenant Allegrezza stops by to question Miriam about Alice's disappearance. Lieutenant Allegrezza is played by character actor Dan Hedaya, whom we have seen in The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension. Sarah drops by the townhouse in search of John. Miriam, who wields some kind of supernatural seductive power over her, invites her inside. Miriam plays the flower duet from Leo Delibes' opera Lakmé on the piano, and Miriam and Sarah end up having sex. While out to dinner with Tom, Sarah finds herself unable to eat. Tom is suspicious of her new relationship with Miriam, especially when he discovers Miriam has given Sarah her very own Ankh necklace. Soon, Sarah becomes desperately ill. In the lab, Tom runs tests. He finds that Sarah has an unidentifiable strain of strong and disease-resistant non-human blood running through her veins. At the townhouse, Sarah demands to know what Miriam has done to her. Miriam explains that they exchanged blood the previous night, which has transformed her. Sarah will begin craving blood, and she's now dependent upon Miriam to teach her how to feed. An agitated Sarah flees from the townhouse and tries to call Tom from a payphone. At the phone booth, she's harassed by two young men, played by Willem Dafoe, whom we've already seen in Streets of Fire, and John Pankow. Pankow and Dafoe would reunite on screen in 1985's To Live and Die in L.A. Sick and miserable without blood, Sarah heads to Miriam's townhouse and huddles in bed while Miriam goes out and finds a young man to feed to her. Weak and sick, Sarah nonetheless resists the urge to drink blood, so Miriam feeds on the young man herself. When Tom drops by the townhouse looking for Sarah, Miriam sends him up to the bedroom, where a desperate Sarah kills and feeds on him. Miriam flashes back to her origins as a vampire in ancient Egypt. When a blood-covered Sarah joins her after dining on Tom, Miriam says Sarah will live forever as her immortal partner. To avoid this fate, Sarah stabs herself in the throat with the Ankh and kisses Miriam, forcing her to drink her blood. Miriam carries a dying Sarah up to the attic. John and all her other former lovers rise up out of their coffins, decaying and grotesque, and attack Miriam. Miriam calls out that she loves them all, then throws herself over the railing and plummets to the ground floor. Her former lovers, John included, wither away into dust as Miriam ages rapidly. Sometime later, Lieutenant Allegrezza stops by the townhouse, hoping to speak to John and Miriam, and finds it empty and up for sale. In London, Sarah is living in a tastefully appointed apartment with a pair of young lovers, presumably her new immortal companions. In a storage room somewhere, a still-living Miriam wails from within a draped coffin. That ending, with Sarah alive and leading a glamorous immortal life, was a product of studio interference. Originally, the film was supposed to end in sweeping tragedy, with Sarah choosing to take her own life rather than spend eternity hooked on human blood. Studio executives wanted to leave the ending open for a possible sequel, which never happened because The Hunger was not a success. Particularly with its original ending, The Hunger is clearly an addiction metaphor. The vampires are junkies, leading an anguished and violent existence dependent on human blood, and Sarah would rather die than spend eternity plagued with an addiction she can't break. The film is also about the fear of aging, of trading health and youth and beauty for prolonged decline and eventual death. The Immortals of The Hunger have solved only half of that equation. They have eternal life, but not eternal youth, health, and beauty. Despite their sexy and glamorous immortal lives, their condition ultimately dooms them. But fundamentally, The Hunger is mostly about looking fabulous. At the time of its release, it was critically lambasted for prioritizing style over substance and for being too much a product of MTV. And sure, the story is pretty sparse, and the narrative is sometimes tough to follow because the film is edited in the style of a music video, with lots of quick cuts and extreme close-ups and scenes intercut with rapid-fire shots from different scenes. And if that's not your thing, you're probably going to find The Hunger pretty exasperating. But I love those early days of MTV when music videos were enigmatic and filled with striking and evocative images, and were often confusing or downright nonsensical, but in a way that did a great job of grabbing viewer attention. The complaints about The Hunger lacking substance might be valid, but that does not detract from my enjoyment of the film in any way. The Hunger looks amazing. Every character looks like they stepped right out of a Patrick Nagel painting. The characters wear couture and keep their sunglasses on indoors at night while hanging out in smoky rooms with flattering lighting, while sipping fancy drinks or clutching lit cigarettes. If you're an aficionado of this very specific kind of highly stylized look of the 80s, The Hunger is going to give you a boner. It's interesting to compare The Hunger to the two other vampire films I've looked at in this series, The Lost Boys and Near Dark, both of which are also highly entertaining films. The Lost Boys is a high-energy romp about super cool teen vampires, complete with a rock soundtrack and tons of jokes. Near Dark is a grungy and violent film about ratty, mean, nomadic vampires in a desert community. Of the three films, The Hunger is the most outwardly sophisticated, in that it centers around rich, world-weary Manhattanites who play classical music in their elegant, antique-filled townhouse in between slaughtering hapless club kids. While there's a good amount of bloodshed in The Hunger, the violence is so stylized that it doesn't really register as violence. We see a lot of dramatic splashes of bright red, but not much gore. Despite being a theatrical failure, The Hunger is now a cult favorite, both because it stars David Bowie and because it looks so good. In particular, it's been embraced by the goth community, thanks in part to that attention-grabbing Bauhaus performance that kicks off the film. In 1996, fashion designer Alexander McQueen themed a runway collection around The Hunger. There was a 1997 spin-off anthology series that aired for 2 seasons on Showtime in the United States, which featured appearances by David Bowie and presented standalone tales of erotic horror. A long-gestating remake of The Hunger is currently in pre-production at Warner. The Hunger may not have had much impact at the time of its release, but its lingering influence proves there's always an audience for sexy and stylish vampires. Next time, I'm looking at the 1986 adaptation of the off-Broadway musical Little Shop of Horrors. Thank you very much for watching, and please enjoy your week.